I want to talk a little bit about what Peter was saying about different sites and how things start out. People who are using the tools aren't always the people who should wind up with the expertise over them. The original social networking really were the AOL book club message boards. And when I came into AOL in 2004, they were hopping. They were very busy talking about Harry Potter. Right now, they're probably very busy talking about The Shack. But I saw when I came in that there was a need for something else. That sometimes people get mired down in minutiae of very popular books and don't end up talking about all the other books out there. And so I tried to create our channel, AOL Books, as somewhere that had more of an authority, more of, that's why I decided to become the book maven, because I wanted to be someone who was a really good friend, but also someone who had some expertise to be able to point your way. And so it does end up bubbling up. I think Peter has a really good point that some of the things we're seeing now with blogs and reviews are going to end up being used by very, very good personages who have review credentials in the future. So.
I'm looking at our questions, and I don't think we're going to get through everything. I think the next one is important, and it's really for anyone on the panel. Is user-generated content evolving too? Or is it working fine?
I don't mind taking that one. I mean, I see user-generated content, I mean, you can define that in a number of different ways. But I think it definitely is evolving and not necessarily in a great way. I think a lot of I guess several years ago, as you start to look at message boards and on sites and what people were throwing out there, really in the sort of the beginning of all of the user-generated content buzz, there were definitely some very good opinions and some people who were very dedicated to creating content. And I think in my experience and what I've seen, a lot of those have moved on to more proper platforms, whether they be blogs and so forth. And as the mass of user-generated content keeps growing and keeps growing, we're a number of years into that now. That is even harder to navigate through and to understand. So the user-generated content, I think, starts to become a little bit more successful when there's a better model around it, whether it be a social platform like Goodreads or Shelfari or whatever your site might be. That's a great place for users to share information. And it's something I think separate than the expert-generated content, but they're not competing. I think they're two separate things because me personally, I do listen to my friends and what they recommend that I read, but I like my friends a lot, but I wouldn't want to rely solely on them. So I absolutely do look for the expert as well as that. So to go back to the user-generated content, though, I do think it's gotten out of hand a bit. It's very hard to navigate, and when I see user content, I think it's best in the context of a social platform where I don't have to hear what absolutely everyone out there is saying. I filtered it of all of those users of that user-generated content to the people who I trust, my friends, people who I've decided have an authority of some kind or whose opinions I respect.
Or sometimes they've read the reviews written by experts, and that's where they make the great recommendation.
Absolutely. I mean, that's definitely true. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm feeling now, I guess, a little bit is that I guess something like this starts to fill me with a little bit of, let's say, productive despair, because even on this panel, where we're all charged with the same task, which is to think about what's going to happen a year from now. Pretty clearly, we're coming from somewhat different perspectives in terms of whether or not there is authority, whether or not it's the wisdom of the crowds, whether or not, to what degree those two things should interact, and which should get precedence. And it's, I mean, I guess, short of surveying everyone, not just the 150 people in this room, but every reader in the world, and finding out the ways that they use information about books to get to books that they love. And even then, you're going to find, I think, a very balkanized, inconclusive set of results. I think maybe the answer is that all these things will continue to or one of the answers, is that all these things will continue to coexist, and it's not so much about refining them as it is, just like it's about getting readers to the right books, it's about getting readers to the right kinds of review sites, and different people have very different needs. Somebody who reads a lot and who reads through an author's work might feel differently about a site that doesn't have what we're calling expertise. So that if there's a new book by an author, that reviewer doesn't seem to know about the previous book. For some readers, that might be fine. Kids, for example, read totally differently. I have 2 kids, 8 and 5, and I've never seen them read a review. Never. I know that seems funny. Right, it seems funny when you think about it, but it's odd, and they read with just as much enthusiasm and passion and hatred at times, and they leave the book, and I say, why aren't you finishing that? And the 8-year-old says, I don't like it. But he's not, that's not informed in any way by anything he read elsewhere, and soon it will be. And as that process shifts, my grandmother is impressed that you can buy books on Amazon for a penny, even though the shipping, whatever it ends up being. And she reads only the reader reviews at this point. Does not trust any professional reviews because she thinks, correctly or incorrectly, the people who are going to the trouble of writing a reader review, she doesn't think they might be paid by the publisher. She thinks they're people like her who bought the book for a penny. So it's, the internet's very, very, very broad, and it's wiped out local scenes, and it's created other local scenes, and it's made the possibility for all of us to do different things. But it's a matter, I think, of connecting those readers with those sites. I, like David, sort of still believe, partly for selfish reasons, in the starred PW review. It is a thing. Now, what that thing means, may be different to each of you, but it is a brand, like David said, and it is something.
Just add one thing, and I'm going to say something probably quite inflammatory, but one of the things that we haven't said yet, and I don't think it's always the case, but many times the idea of user-generated means also lowest common denominator, and when you're dealing with books and concepts, that's not always the best way to go. Even my experience on working on Shelfari, being on it all day long for several months, there were many times where I was very frustrated because my shelf, if you will, had a few hundred books on it, and a lot of them I was very passionate about. I had my I love and 5 stars and what have you. I was asked the same questions over and over again. Should I read The Kite Runner? Can you recommend The Da Vinci Code? I think I still get that question. I mean, those were 2 or 3 out of a few hundred books, and many of them were the ones that I would love to have been able to say, if you really are a reader, you are going to love this particular book. No one seemed to care about Jeanette Walls or what have you. So I think it all wraps up to, if we really, really care about this particular industry, those aren't the only books out there, and those aren't the only books that are going to carry the industry. I mean, they certainly carry their weight, but I think we all have bigger ideals and hopes. So I'm not a big fan of just user-generated content.
Otis may want to follow up on that.
Yeah.